Hey guys, it's Pri. I'm back here with another time-lapse video where I'm going to do the whole voicing over it with updates on what's been going on, as well as any Q&As that you guys have submitted, and it looks like a few of you have. So I'm going to get into that in a little bit. But first, I am going to go over some things you probably have some questions about as far as what I talked about last week. One of those things is, Chris's health. How has he been doing? Well, after the hospital, he stayed at home for about a week. He's recovering a lot better at home now. Still not 100%, but he's getting there. He's feeling all right. So that's good. And I like to thank those who, were there for us, as well as those who kind of sent their good vibes his way. That's pretty cool that you guys were kind of thinking of him. So he appreciates it. Another thing I want to go over is it is now October. Yeah, that means Inktober has begun, and I'm already failing hard at it. I didn't even start drawing mine till like 10 p.m. on the first day, and right before I was gonna submit it, the Twitter servers were down and I couldn't even submit it on day one. So I submitted my first ink, which I ended up going ham and ended up doing a full-on painting, which you can see here that I'm painting right now. It's a little witchy poo, but yeah, I submitted her actually on day 2, but now that it's day 3, it's 12:40 a.m. on day 3, and I haven't done my day 2's trying. So I'm already racking up a debt here that I'm gonna have to go through. But mainly I was thinking about doing Halloween themed pinups every other day, kind of mixed in with food drawing, because I like food. I take a lot of pictures of food. If you follow my Twitter or Instagram, yeah, I'm one of those girls. But I thought it'd be cool to do some still life kind of practice painting with my food drawings, or food photos. And maybe that would be neat. But most importantly, what I need to get done is art for the Bellingham. Oh man, I said that weird. Bellingham Comic-Con. That is on October 19th, I believe. It's kind of a small convention, but it's a really good one. A lot of very, very passionate people go there. A lot of fans. So I'm trying to scramble getting some new content in, because I'm one of those people that kind of procrastinate and end up scrambling to finish a few new things right before the convention happens. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to do right now. So I'm gonna have to do a couple more sugar and spice cards here. I'm working on the pink Power Ranger, as well as I already did a sketch for Rainbow Bright, and I'm pretty excited about that one. Rainbow Bright was one of my heroes when I was 4 or 5 years old, and I still remember her to this day. I had like a little Rainbow Bright belt, and it was amazing. So yeah, I'm excited for the nostalgia berries to be all up in my mouth. I should have not said that, but this was a pretty good recording run, so I'm not going to edit it out. So yeah, there you go. Nostalgia berries all up in my mouth. As far as games go, I wanted to get like a really chill game. A lot of stress been going on this month, so I wanted something that I could kick back and kind of be a little bit mindless about and play. So I ended up getting the House Flipper game. Looked really mundane as fuck, and that kind of what sold me on it. I was like, yeah, that's what I need in my life. So played it. It had a lot of potential, but I'm not gonna play it again, because for those of you who don't know, I have pretty wicked motion sickness when it comes to first person view. So I can't really play a lot of shooters. Some shooters I can for some reason, like I can play Left 4 Dead, but I can't play things like Call of Duty or Halo or things like that because I just get horribly nauseous and stuff. Like I need to lay down for hours and stuff if it gets really bad. So yeah, and I played for an hour. I tried to tough it out, but once I kind of finished that one mission, I was like, I'm out. I'm gonna go lay down and die or something. So yeah, sorry if people thought that was kind of interesting, although it might not be. It was just me sweeping and shit. But yeah, like, oh, watch me clean this window. Watch me mop the floor. Like, I know that's very exciting and all, but unfortunately I'm not going to be able to do that again. So thanks for those who hung out with me during that stream. But yeah, so that brings me to pretty much the most exciting part of this segment, which is the Q&A. So I kind of said, hey guys, ask me whatever you want to ask, as long as it's not like crazy personal, like, hey, what's your address? Where do you live? And what's your social security number? Or whatever. What are your fetishes? I don't know. Things like that. But yeah, some of you responded to the call. So what I'm going to say is that I'm not going to answer all the questions in one shebang. What I'm going to do is kind of pick and choose some questions that I feel are kind of appropriate as far as length goes when I go into answering it. And I don't know how long I'm going to take to answer these, really, because sometimes I just go on a rant, and I really apologize for that, but that's kind of how it is. So I'm going to answer like 1, 2, who knows how many of these questions, and then kind of leave the rest for whatever other videos I come out with, because who knows how much content I'm going to push out. So I need to have something to talk about with those videos. So thanks for those who, submitted their questions. And, if anyone else wants to chime in and put their 2 cents in, go ahead, DM me on Twitter or message me on Facebook, or write questions in the comments in the YouTube channels and things like that. Or you can even message me on YouTube, and I'll save all the questions. I'll write a little list down and try to go through them as best as possible. But yeah, I guess let's get going. Okay, question number 1. Have you gotten around to playing A Way Out yet? So the answer to that is no. Unfortunately, because of Chris being sick and all and trying to get better, he also had to play a lot of catch up when it came to work, as well as personal work that he was, personal projects he wanted to get finished that he was working on and had to put a hold on. So he's kind of getting through that. And so when he feels up for it, then, we'll probably get into either that one, or, as I said, Man of Medan or Monster Hunter. I kind of want to do whatever he wants to do, because I want him to feel a little bit better, less stress, get the Heelys going after the whole hospital visit. So yeah, I'll definitely post when we play, but right now we're gonna put a pin in that one. Question number 2. What is the difference between Maya and ZBrush? Well, what I can say is that the similarities between the two is that they are both 3D packages that are used in both the game industry and the film industry when creating 3D assets. But usually these programs are both used by an artist when creating any sort of 3D asset. It typically isn't one or the other, depending on what you're working on, I guess I should say. So going into the differences, Maya is kind of like a more well-rounded 3D package, and the same goes with 3ds Max or Blender and things like that. And what I mean by well-rounded is that you can do things like low poly modeling, as well as animation, lighting, rendering, rigging, effects, UV mapping, unwrapping textures and things like that. And it ends up kind of going beyond the whole modeling aspect. what ZBrush is it excels at high poly modeling and sculpting for assets. And even though ZBrush, like Pixelogic, the company that makes ZBrush, has created a lot of awesome tools, like the Z modeling tool that allows you to create low poly models while you're in ZBrush, it still tends to not be the preferred method when you make your final asset for games. Usually, a lot of the low poly modeling you do in ZBrush is intended for a starting point, I guess, for things like baking or reprojecting your model to get a cleaner mesh. And I might be using lingo here that might be a little bit over some people's heads here, but what I mean by like low poly modeling versus high poly modeling is low polys, basically a 3D asset is created by geometry called polygons. And you probably heard this before, but they're the faces in a 3D object that are lit in either a game engine or a rendering system of some sort. And the more of these faces that you have, the more expensive it gets. The harder it is for, like, for instance, your graphics card to, deal or handle with that shit. As well as it's just more difficult to work with as an artist as far as like things like unwrapping and texturing goes. So what happens is that an artist creates two different models. So the low poly model is basically kind of the bare bones of the amount of geometry you need to make a decent silhouette of the object you're making. And this object is what goes into, for instance, the game. This is the object that the player sees. This is the object that the animators animate with and all that jazz. So what the high poly model is for is it's used for basically projecting all that detail onto the low poly model and kind of faking that this low poly model has all this detail when it actually doesn't. And the baking process is basically taking that high poly model and putting it on top of the low poly model, and projection basically happens, and it gathers all this lighting information called a normal map, as well as other information like ambient occlusion and curvature maps and other things like that are then applied onto the low poly model. And pretty much what you end up getting is a low poly model that looks like it has a crap ton of detail, like the high poly model that you ended up making. A good example would be that if you saw like any sort of character model where you see the face and you see the untextured model itself, it's very flat and smooth and such, but when you look at the high poly model, you see all these folds and wrinkles and pores and stuff that people sculpt into that, and that ends up getting projected onto the low poly model. And so then the low poly model looks like it has those wrinkles, those folds, those pores that you didn't actually need to sculpt in or model in, because that would be just basically really ridiculous to have a game running with literally modeled pores in the skin. But anyway, ZBrush is a pretty powerful tool though in itself, and sometimes some artists don't need to make a low poly model. It depends on what their work is. Like if you are someone who is like a figure artist and makes toys or figurines and things like that, sometimes you might want to make a lower poly mesh just for cleanup work, but not to the scale that game artists do. ZBrush also allows you to do something called poly painting, which allows you to paint color onto the model surface. Other programs do this as well, but don't necessarily excel at it. It kind of depends from 3D package to 3D package. I know Blender does it. I know 3D Coat does it, as well as ZBrush, of course. But a lot of people end up also painting in another program called Substance Painter, where you bake your high poly onto your low poly model, and you import those models into that program, and you can paint the texture onto there, like a paintbrush and stuff like that. But that's kind of going beyond the question. So anyway, that's kind of the high level of what the difference between Maya and ZBrush are. Pretty much, you can use either Maya, Max, or probably Blender to do your low poly modeling. But when you do high poly modeling, you probably want to go for ZBrush, or I don't even know if Mudbox is still being used anymore, like if they stopped supporting that. But Mudbox was another one. I hear Blender has a sculpting tool, but I've never used it. I have actually never used Blender and stuff like that, but I hear it's a pretty cool package, so maybe that's something to investigate. But when sculpting, it's a lot more like painting, so highly recommend using some sort of Cintiq or tablet of the sort with a stylus, because a lot of these programs are also pressure sensitive. So sculpting, when I say 3D sculpting, it's very much like literal sculpting, like you're sculpting with clay, where you're pulling and pushing and pinching volumes out of a 3D object. So it's a lot of fun. As far as ZBrush goes, though, the controls are wonky if you are used to certain 3D packages. ZBrush doesn't use any of those universal navigation type of controls, so it's something that is hard to get a handle on, and it takes some getting used to. But when you do, it's a lot of fun, and you create some cool, amazing things. But yeah, I think we'll stop there with the questions for this video, and I'll start answering some of the other ones in the next one. But yeah, again, feel free to ask any more questions, and I will try to get to them when I can. Okay, bye guys. Pre out.